Well, good evening and welcome. This is Strong and Sassy here on your superstation Joy 99.7 FM. How have you been? It's been a minute, but it's so good to be back. And I hope all of our football fans appreciated the break in Strong and Sassy so we could bring you football because we love you just like that. But now we're back and looking forward to a really riveting conversation this evening. Once again, you're warmly welcome. My name is Animwaa Anim-Addo. Very, very happy to be here with you this evening. And tonight we're talking about toxic environments, working in a toxic environment. Now, it's not a general conversation about just working in toxic environments. Of course, this show is tailored for women. So we'll be talking about women working in a toxic environment, what a toxic environment looks like, what it feels like, what it does to you. And of course, we'll also be self-reflecting because you want to know if you are the person who is causing your work environment to be toxic. That's all important conversation coming up. And I am so super excited to have two amazing women joining me tonight. Both of them are joining me on Zoom, which is just as amazing. I have, I think it's the first time for both of them that I am speaking to. So I have Louisa Laryea, FCCA. She's a chartered accountant, banker, project management practitioner, industrial relations coach. So Louisa will be joining us, as well as Dr. Evelyn Owusu Roberts, who is a licensed clinical psychologist. I would love for this show to be interactive, so send me your questions, send me your thoughts. Let me put it to the professionals if you have any concerns about your workplace. Our text lines are opened. It's 055-11-11997, 055-11-11997. If you're just tuning in, this is Strong and Sassy here on Joy 99.7 FM. My name is Animwaa Anim-Addo. Joining me tonight, Louisa Laryea and Dr. Evelyn Owusu Roberts. All right, so let me say hello to Dr. Roberts. Hello, good evening. Hello. Hi, Doc.
Oh. Hi.
Hi, there you are. Hello, good evening and welcome.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, sure. I'm going to say a quick hello to Louisa as well. Hi, Louisa. Good evening.
Hi, Animwaa. Good evening to you. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for making time to be here with us. Okay, so diving straight into the conversation, Louisa, let me start with you. So people use the word toxic quite loosely these days. Everything is toxic. But can you give us, I don't want to say you should define a toxic work environment for us, but can you give us some key indicators that the environment that we're working in is toxic?
All right. Animwaa, thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks a lot for having me on your show. When you say toxic or a toxic environment, it just communicates something undesirable, right? So when you say you find yourself in a toxic relationship or in a toxic environment, it means you are in a very undesirable place, a place you wouldn't love to be. And so off the cuff, I would say that some of the signs you can pick in a toxic work environment would be maybe lack of trust, excessive criticism in the workplace, bullying. There could also be some unhealthy amorous relationships, sexual harassment, poor work-life balance, just a dysfunctional environment, a dysfunctional work environment, or an environment that connotes negativity. Yeah, and so pretty much if you find yourself in an environment like that, it actually will stress you, and you don't actually look forward to going to work. So
Right.
maybe for starters, that's what I would say.
Okay. I think we get that. Doc, let me come to you. So, I mean, from what Louisa has described, this is when the environment is causing all of those things. Now, my concern is before we label an environment toxic, how much introspection do we need to do to be sure that the toxicity is not actually ourselves or us projecting our feelings about ourselves or about our jobs onto an environment which may not necessarily be toxic?
That's a very good question. Because the toxic environment could be toxic because it actually is toxic, or the toxic environment can be something that one perceives as toxic. Sometimes when one has their own issues going on, and maybe they have some personality issues, which affects relationships, or maybe they have some own stress which makes it difficult for them to take on any stressful situation. And I mean, work is a stressful situation, or maybe they may even be depressed themselves. But so sometimes, just taking these three scenarios, if you have that going on for you personally, it is possible that you may perceive, maybe wrongly, that a situation is toxic when maybe it is not, when maybe the work needs to be done on that individual himself or herself.
Yeah, so I mean, so basically, how do you then define, before we jump into whether an environment is toxic or not, how do you draw that clear line of, okay, because I don't want people listening to who maybe are not too sure, is it me, is it the workplace, is it me, to suddenly jump and label their environment toxic when it's not. So how are some of the ways, that the very clear cut ways, that you can have a conversation with yourself and say, okay, if this is this, then is this, if this is this, then is that?
Okay, so first of all, let's look at the environment. Usually, when one is in a toxic work environment, there doesn't tend to be a lot of structure. There tend to be unhealthy relationships. So sometimes maybe you have a boss who is either piling too much work on you, and that work goes, unappreciated, or maybe they want some sexual favors. Okay, so
Right.
that makes it a toxic work environment, an environment where maybe there might be some favoritism. So when it comes to promotion, there might not necessarily be a clear cut, path to promotion. It's a toxic work environment if, again, it's difficult for there to be that work-life balance where your bosses or the people that are supervising you are expecting you to basically spend your entire lives, at the workplace, when that is basically not in your contract. So sometimes toxic work environments also have a lot of breakages when it comes to contracts, because you find that there is one contract that you have signed, and there is one reality which is totally different, and which is making you do much more work than you are also remunerated for or even acknowledged. We also have a toxic work environment when you find that um, like you are burnt out because of the work. Like you don't feel energized by your work. Like you're always tired. You don't look forward to going to work. Because of the condition there. Sometimes there's a lot of politics
Right.
that's happening in the work environment. So all of these things make for a toxic situation when it comes to the work environment.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think that helps us to, draw a line between us and the environment. Louisa, let me come to you. First of all, your fans are blowing up our WhatsApp lines. Let me just say that. Apparently you're called Mama Lou, so your CBG fans are sending, hellos. Your grammar fans are looking forward to English lessons on the show.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, that's what's happening in the studio now. So
That's fine.
so
That's
yeah.
fine.
So I mean, Louisa, from what Doc has said in terms of us being able to draw the line between whether we are toxic or whether the environment is toxic. how do we begin to draw boundaries? There's this TikTok video. I don't know if you've seen it. This funny lady, who's always being asked to do extra things. She always has a creative way of responding. I think it's Veronica or something like that. And her boss is always trying to get her to stay extra hours, always trying to make it seem like she's not working overtime, therefore she's not a good worker. I mean, first of all, those are definitely examples of a toxic environment. But then how do you begin to draw boundaries, but also keep your job?
Okay. It's a very dicey one, because at the end of the day, you want your job and you also want some serenity in the workplace to get work done. And so you have to approach this quite cautiously so that you don't add to the already toxic environment, and then it makes things even more difficult for you. I really believe in communication, because everything that happens with us, around us, and to us will have to be resolved through communication. And I believe in very sincere, frank communication. And so if you find yourself in a toxic environment, for me, I'm going to have a conversation, first of all, with my supervisor. And if my supervisor is the one who is the source of the toxicity, I'm going to go to the next level, or to HR. And one-on-one communication is very important, because you can't just set a boundary when nobody knows what's going on with you. You're working with people, and so people need to access you, and you also need access to people. And so when you set those boundaries, you're literally going to be cutting people off, and work has to be done, and work has to go on. So before those boundaries are set, I believe and I recommend that you're going to have a one-on-one, sincere, frank conversation on what is causing the toxicity in the workplace.
Right, but Louisa, that requires trust, because I mean, I get that if you're in a workplace and you're already feeling, like maybe this person is against me, or this is not working, I think inherently when things are not working in a place, you automatically begin to have trust issues with the people who are supposed to be. Exactly. So how do you then conquer that trust issue to say, I'm going to talk to this person? How do you decide, what are the things, the specifics, if possible, that you look at to decide who to speak to, who to trust?
All right. So everybody in the workplace cannot be against you. But if everybody is against you in the workplace, then maybe the problem is you. And so you will definitely find one person you can go to with clear communication, the things you want to talk about, the things you want to address. And anytime the environment is toxic, you are not the only person feeling the toxicity. There's everyone feeling it, or there are most people in the workplace feeling and experiencing that toxicity. And so when you bring up the issue to discuss with a supervisor or that one trusted person, you're definitely going to have audience. And it's about how you're going to approach it. So you're going to write down, because you want to be very clear in your communication. And at the end of the day, you want to solve a problem.
Right.
And so you're not just speaking and talking, or you're not just gossiping about the situation, because your end game is a solution. And so you're writing out your clear issues that you want to address, that you want to talk about, before you approach whoever you're going to talk to.
Right. Okay. So this question is for both Louisa and Doc. But Louisa, since I'm talking to you, let me start with you. So you're talking about writing down and all of that. Now this conversation is obviously more geared towards women. Women, we have a certain way we speak. We're very feelings based. And so sometimes in our communication, it would be almost like, and this person did this and I felt, or I feel this, or I feel this, or I feel this. How do we communicate effectively so that we are heard beyond, that initial stereotyped judgment of, women are in their feelings, which is almost like the first line of,
Yeah. I don't believe in feelings and emotions. I'm sorry to break your bubble in Animwaa.
It's okay.
In the workplace, this is a corporate, serious work environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you come to me to want to talk about something, or I am approaching another person to talk about something, I've got to be specific on the things I'm going to be talking about.
Right, okay.
I can't go and say, I feel this person looked at me this way, so I feel they don't like me, or that person did that. I have got to go into this conversation with evidences and pieces of information that are verifiable, because at the end of the day, our goal is to solve a problem. And so you can't solve a problem if you are just speaking in general terms and you don't have evidence to what you're saying, and it's just about how you feel, and it's just about emotion.
Right.
That won't work.
Okay.
So I like to document things a lot, and if you speak to the people I work with, they will tell you that everything I do has to be documented through the emails, through the text messages, and all of that. Because I don't want a situation where it's going to be one person's word against the other person's word.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. So, Doc, now let me come to you. So, Louisa is able to deal with issues, from a very logical point of view, which is what most women are aspiring to. Unfortunately, not, everybody has gotten to that level of efficiency. So can you, sort of walk us through how to transition from a feeling of being completely overwhelmed, completely victimized in a workplace, completely feeling like you don't have a voice, nobody wants to listen to you, depending on the time of the month as well, all of those things. Can you talk us through being able to put all of that together and submit what Louisa is saying, verifiable, detailed, as women, how do we manage all of those things and get to this place that Louisa is talking about?
Okay. So I think, first of all, it starts with the mindset. It starts with the understanding that when we are looking at the opportunity that communication provides, you want that communication, that meeting to be effective. So for it to be effective, you have to practice good communication. And good communication is, basically message sent equals message received. So what that means is that you have to make sure that you're in a state where you can effectively communicate. So if you are highly emotional, what that means is that it's going to be difficult for you to be able to express yourself and express yourself effectively. So one is also knowing that you need to try to be in an emotionally neutral space, even when you are going to talk about something that is very emotional to you. Another strategy is to almost practice kind of your points, what you want to have communicated before. And this can help, with the emotionality of, the communication. Another is to try to practice potential self-soothing mechanisms, knowing that if I am, going to become, emotionally dysregulated, what are some of the things I could potentially do in the meeting to try to calm down? How can I breathe? How can I maybe squeeze my hands a little bit? Like, what are some of the strategies to, calm myself down when I find that I am getting a little bit more emotional when I am communicating? Another is trying to communicate as much as possible, even though there might be someone responsible for how you're feeling. It's always difficult for someone to hear you when they feel like you are blaming them. Although like you are blaming them, but to be able to communicate in a sense where you are really looking at expressing your experience, but in an objective way, so that they don't hear it's your fault, and you are not doing this right, but they're actually hearing this is how the situation is, and this is how this situation is going to make anyone, in this situation respond. So these are just a few of the communication strategies I would say needs to be implemented when trying to address situations in a toxic environment.
Okay. We got that. So Louisa, now from the human relations point of view, sometimes obviously it helps us when we're going into a situation to know what to expect. So let's say I'm sitting across you, I've come with my complaint, and all of that. What can I expect when I'm coming into that meeting? What are the things I can expect from you or from your response?
Okay, so this is very important because the way the person approaching me feels is very important to the resolution process we're going to be starting. And so my posturing in receiving the person should even communicate to the person that they're welcome to talk about their issues. If my posturing doesn't communicate to the person that they're welcome to speak, or they can say anything and everything, and they can be assured that they're being listened to and they're going to obtain help, then we're not going to go anywhere with what process we've started to resolve the situation. And so whoever is going to be listening to a complaint or going to be taking a complaint has to be empathetic, because at the end of the day, if everybody in the workplace is burnt out, is exhausted, is tired, is stressed, work is not going to happen. You're not going to achieve the bottom line. And so the entire institution has an equal stake in ensuring that the toxic environment is resolved. And depending on what the issue is, whoever is going to be involved in resolving it has got to be very well versed in resolving that issue. And I'll give you an example. If it's a matter of staff perceiving unfairness in the workplace or lack of consistency in decision making, for instance, or staff feel, especially women, we're talking about women, and my focus really is women in this instance.
Yeah.
Because I was just looking at a McKinsey research of 2023 just this afternoon, and I see that women are 25.8% not likely to compete favorably with men in seeking higher opportunities in the workplace.
Yeah.
And this is partly due to the woman's role in the home and even in society. So there's an opportunity for both a man and a woman who are qualified. But unfortunately, the day for the interview has the woman in the hospital. Maybe she's unwell, maybe she's going through prenatal care, maybe she's going through postpartum depression, maybe her child is unwell.
Yep.
And so that just leaves the woman out of the competition. And so women are usually somewhat disadvantaged when opportunities come up in the workplace. And so the woman is now by herself and looking at what qualifications and experience she has, and looking at the other man who probably doesn't even have as much experience, but they have all the opportunity. And so in an instance like that, when the woman has to go and seek resolution and see how they can scale this challenge, she obviously has to go to HR. And if the head of HR is not posturing or is not positing for this woman to feel welcome to talk about pay raises and opportunities and all that, where else is a woman going to go? Does she go to the CEO? Does she go to her peers? Does she gossip about it or, just leave it there? Or where does she go to? And so a lot also depends on leadership in the workplace. So much depends on leadership to ensure that the workplace is functional enough for the institution to be able to live up to their core mandate to ramp up their bottom line. So I will call leadership to be responsible in this process. Yeah.
Right. Wow. That was deep. So basically, when we come to you, we can expect that we will be listened to.
Absolutely.
And obviously, it makes it easier if we come, well documented with our points put together, and all of that. So Louisa, now let's say, okay, not everybody, is correct. So basically, you have,
Can you say that again?
I was saying, I said not everybody is correct. So basically, So basically, you come to, your HR manager. They have their own prejudices about you, whatever it is, you try to communicate as well as you can. You're unsuccessful in being heard, or, you are immediately shut down, or, immediately there's a wall put up. Where do you go from there?
Okay, so the HR has a boss.
Okay.
Yes. And this is where documentation comes in. And meanwhile, I like to write. I write everything.
Yeah.
If I go to the HR manager and I'm being frustrated or I'm not being listened to, I'm going to do an email to the boss of the HR person.
Okay.
And I'm going to do an email devoid of every emotion. I'm going to stick to the fact I have this issue. I went to the people management head. She didn't mind me, or she didn't do anything about my situation. These are the issues I took to her, and I expected resolution, or I expected an update the day after or something. I'm not getting that. And so I want audience from you. That's what I am going to do. And every staff deserves that opportunity. Every staff deserves that audience with the boss of the HR person. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Let me ask Doc this. So from what Louisa said, again, I will come to you about preparedness and state of mind. In escalating a situation, from your HR manager, to your HR manager's boss. To be honest, the whole process sounds quite tedious. Not if it goes well, obviously, then you've had a really lovey-dovey conversation with your HR, manager. But if it doesn't, then it's beginning to look like it's a fight. So from the get-go, should we prepare our minds that I may have to fight to be heard? And how do I, find that resilience, that confidence to be in the state of mind where, like Louisa said, if you're not hearing me, I'm going to speak to your boss?
To be honest, it's really not easy, especially depending on the kind of personality that one has. It's so easy for the confident person to follow these processes, but a little bit more difficult for somebody who is a little bit more timid and who also really frankly doesn't want to lose their job. And we also know what the employment situation here is. So sometimes you have all of these things battling, in the mind of the person who really wants to, have their say, right? And to be able to be heard and for there to be change. And so first of all, it's really knowing your workplace and knowing that there's that possibility for change. But sometimes someone needs to be the one that stands out and speaks up. And so they're also knowing that the process is not going to be an easy one.
Yeah.
It's going to be a difficult one. And then mentally preparing yourself for that. Because I think everyone will know, okay, I have a good HR manager, or this HR manager is going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
And so then, and what that means is that I have to go through the process, but it's likely that I may have to go above the HR manager, and am I ready for that, and how do I get ready for that? So because I know that maybe above the HR manager I can be heard and I can really get things the way that I may want it. But then sometimes you may even go above the HR manager, and from the boss to the everyone, like it's a bad situation altogether.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
then if it's a bad situation from top to bottom, that is where there needs to be a different response there. Like, I mean, just for documentation sake, you do that. Of course, there's also the labor commission and all of that, but that's a whole different that's a whole different thing, right? But then it's really looking at how far are you willing to take this fight, and being prepared, for what it would take and the cost of it.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to a fight that you're about to start, because sometimes that's what it is. It might be a fight.
It might be a
and
fight.
knowing that you have the right support system, whether it's at home, with your friends, whoever.
Right. Okay.
Because that would also be important to have, support.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I get that. So Ed has sent us a message. I'm not going to ask his question yet, but I am going to glean something from his first few lines, because I want to talk about sexism when it comes to toxicity. So, Louisa, this one is for you. So the first few lines of Ed's message, and Ed, I know you're listening. I'm not addressing your full question now. I'll come to it, but I just want to do this. So Ed says, Ed is a guy. I find myself in a difficult position at work. Most of my colleagues are women who do not appreciate our boss's management style and often display signs of insubordination. So Louisa, this is my question. Women appreciating a boss's management style and men being comfortable with the boss's management style. Is there a sexism issue when it comes to the way that a boss relates to the people beneath him, when it comes to whether they're men or whether they are women? And are we still battling in the workplace women being treated a certain way or perhaps spoken down to, and then it also raises the question of assertiveness stroke insubordination. I don't know what the question is, but I feel like you understand what I'm trying to ask you.
I get a good estimate of the import of the question.
I appreciate that.
I will try. So what the person is saying is the boss is a man, and so the women don't appreciate the boss's mode of management. Is that it?
Yes, and so they are insubordinate.
Oh, okay. Insubordination has no place in the workplace.
Okay, yes, but okay. So let me actually read what he said to a certain degree. So he says, I find myself in a difficult position at work. Most of my colleagues are women who do not appreciate our boss's management style and often display signs of insubordination. Because I maintain a strong work ethic and positive attitude, the boss prefers to work with me, which unfortunately makes me unpopular among the others. So before you tackle the insubordination, I want us to talk about management styles and how that can be perceived differently, how men perceive it and how women perceive it. Because obviously I feel like if the women are showing signs of insubordination, then there must be something to a certain extent in the management style that is triggering that sort of response.
Yeah. Okay. So I like to say leadership style rather than say management style, because if you're boss, you're leading, and you're supposed to be leading properly. And so if you are a boss of the opposite sex and you're not also conducting yourself well, you're going to have, because the texter didn't disclose exactly what the cause of the insubordination is. So perhaps, I'm just guesstimating, perhaps the boss is also conducting himself in a certain way that gets the subordinates to be insubordinate, something like that. But here's the thing. In the workplace, you have instances where those who are really working hard and doing everything to the letter, staying out of trouble, observing regulation and policy, you have those who have problems with the ones who are prim and proper. You have that in the workplace.
Okay.
You hear things like, it's a work for your father. Why are you working late hours? Why are you breaking your back? Why are you here early? Why are you closing late? Things like that. So there's that. And all these things feed into the toxicity and, if you like, the conflict in the workplace. And so this is where I would talk about boundaries.
Right.
So for this gentleman who texted, once he's getting his job done, he's not breaking any rules or breaching policy and focusing on his job. He just has to set those boundaries and stick to his job, get it done, get out of the place, and earn his keep. I think that's how he's really going to approach it, because you can't have everybody liking you.
Yeah.
And in the workplace, you don't even need to be friends with your colleagues to get the job done. You are colleagues. And so get the job done and you're out of the place. You don't have to be friends. Okay. And so if he's not also doing anything untoward, he should just focus on his job, set his boundaries, and get his job done.
Okay.
If there is subordination from his colleagues are now getting in the way of his job performance, then at that point he would have to escalate the issues that are affecting his job delivery. Okay. And that's a different conversation altogether.
Okay. So I wanted us to talk about the insubordination, but Ed was actually quite specific about what the problem was. So he says that a possible source of tension is that most of them are older and were in the company before the boss joined. This seems to have created a subtle resistance to his authority. So that's what's, from Ed's perspective, that's what's causing the insubordination. Now let me come to you, Doc, because I feel like this is maybe more of a mind thing. Why would people feel this way? I can understand, older women working in a company, a young, dynamic, possibly with a six-pack, possibly somebody who looks like your last born son, is now your boss, and so there's resistance to authority. Can you take us through, again, fixing our state of mind so that we are able to look at the people who lead us, from a place of their capacity to lead, their qualifications, as opposed to age, and even experience, because sometimes they're really knowledgeable people who don't have that much experience, but come and then they're leading us. How do we get ourselves into a state of mind when we have situations like this? A younger boss, vibrant, young, new, not too experienced, and all of that. And how are we, going to be able to submit to the authority of somebody like that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and for me, I also think that both the leader and the follower or followers have roles to play. So if the leader is not being respected by the older women, that should be something that needs to be attended to. I don't know what mechanisms have been put in place to try to resolve that, or maybe because there's this young, vibrant gentleman there who's ready to do the work, it's like, okay, I'm not going to bother with these women, I'm just going to. But how do you get, when you work with people, it's like, how do you get their buy-in? How do you get them to respect you? How do you speak their language? Right? And sometimes that's what needs to happen as a leader. And as a follower, it's also really looking at, okay, this is what has happened. I may not necessarily be happy with it. I may not necessarily disagree with it. But at the end of the day, it is a workplace. And so then if it is a workplace, you need to be able to basically conform with the expectations of your work. It is never acceptable to be insubordinate because you feel a certain kind of way. So I think the mindset here becomes accepting that this is what has happened and really looking at, okay, how do I work with this person, because I need to be able to work with this person because this person is my leader, and putting feelings aside, right, because it is an organization.
Yeah. Okay, so let me finish Ed's message, and then Doc, he asked for some advice so that we can, he says, I'm continuing, he says, lately this dynamic has been affecting my morale. If I had my way, I would honestly avoid working directly in female dominated teams, not out of bias, but because there tends to be constant resistance and excuses when tasks need to be done. When my boss tries to address these issues, it often escalates into conflict. There seems to be a struggle to balance emotions with professionalism, and that has been quite draining for me. So what advice would you have for Ed, who is feeling drained because, the women in his workplace are, being salty and all sorts?
So if he has to be in the workplace, then it's really looking at him trying to identify why he's there and his own purpose. So he almost has to be able to live in a situation and deal with it and not be affected by what is happening around him, right? So then it's almost like being in a bad marriage, right? And knowing that divorce is not something that you want to do right now, right? So then how do you become okay, right? Even in the midst of a bad marriage, it's really trying to take care of yourself, right? What are your stress relief mechanisms? Well, how do you mentally prepare? And how do you maneuver a situation? How do you make sure that you are okay before you enter the office and you are okay after you leave the office? How do you keep your stress levels, low intentionally so that you can deal with the stress of the work environment? And I'm also curious, like when the women are being emotional, what are they saying? Right? I want to know what their problem is, right? What are they crying about? Maybe they are saying it in an emotional way, but is it that maybe they feel like the boss doesn't understand maybe their responsibilities as a woman, maybe their potential energy levels, like what is the issue? Right. I think it would be really good to also know, so that sometimes you need to be able to find the diamond in the rough, right? So maybe they are being emotional, but then they may have some genuine, stuff that needs to be paid attention to,
Yeah.
right? So I would also be curious about that, because there's no smoke without fire too. We can't say that this is entirely, the women are being, crazy.
This way and that. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Doc. So, Louisa, let me come to you. I'm supposed to talk about exit strategies, but I want to ask you something before I do that. In your experience, and obviously this is a women's show, so I definitely want to talk about women. In your experience, are women able to keep feelings? I don't mean or I'm talking about like regular women, like are women able to leave feelings out of the workplace and conduct themselves in a way that is acceptable, or do we need to begin to have conversations about women being psyched up to behave appropriately in a corporate environment?
I would say yes and no.
Okay.
It would depend on who these women are. Even women high up in the institution are all not that assertive and that self-aware. There are those who will just break down and cry in the face of challenges when they feel helpless. And there are those who, I don't want to say will call your bluff, but are strong enough to insist on the right things being done and pursue whatever grievance channels there are to obtain resolution to their issues. But largely, anymore, I would say that I think it's an African thing. There's timidity in the workplace.
Okay.
It's a general, probably African thing. So it's not even just the women, but of course, because we're talking about women, I will just skew it towards the women. There's general timidity in the workplace. And maybe Doc can help us here, but I think this even goes all the way back to school, like primary school, secondary school, university. Those times, those who were talkative in class will have their names written, and so you would rather be quiet and solve by yourself. And if you're even going through something, you just be, quiet about it. And that thing is with the women and has transitioned into the workplace.
Yeah.
So even though you know and you're feeling and you're bearing the brunt of the workplace toxicity, it's usually the famanyame, thing.
Yeah.
I have people come to me who have various challenges, and I say, let's tackle it this way. Let's escalate it this way. Let's talk to this person. And then they say, no, Lou, it's okay. Let's leave it. It's okay. When I find a place, I will go. But that shouldn't be it. So I agree with you anymore. I think we have to have the conversation, lead the conversation around these things and break that jinx that plagues the women who, even though they have a case to talk about and to pursue, they would rather, quote unquote, famanyame and, live in the pain and in the stress. But that shouldn't be it. So I think we should do a lot more advocacy and talking to encourage the women to use their voice.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Louisa. So, Doc, Louisa was asking you inadvertently, how we can, overcome that barrier of timidity and rise into that corporate workspace, where we're thriving and we have a voice, we're assertive, but we're also acting right.
Yeah, so I think like she was saying, so when you get to the point where you're a woman at the workplace, there would have been so many things in your environment that would have told you that you need to keep quiet. You need not to speak out. You need not to be the angry black woman. You just need to be timid, and you need to, basically, not be confrontational, right? Because then if you are confrontational, you are being emotional, right? And so then already the woman is fighting against all of these information. I think when she was talking about a childhood, I remember a popular proverb that we used to hear, or a saying that we used to hear all of the time. And teachers would come into the classroom and say, "Hey, empty barrels make the most noise. Keep quiet." Right? And so then you grow up, and then you inadvertently have that sort of personality or mentality that, yeah, let's not cause anything to shake around here. Let's just be quiet. And so then knowing what we are up against, knowing how our experiences have shaped us, knowing the fears and the anxieties that we have, is one. And they're still knowing the importance and still being able to buy into the need for us to be able to speak and to have our voices heard. And so it's basically a balance of that: the mental preparation, the mental understanding, and then also taking that step, towards being the person that you need to be in the work.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Evelyn Owusu Roberts. Thank you for joining us tonight. Dr. Roberts is a licensed clinical psychologist. It's been a pleasure. And a very big thank you as well to you, Louisa. Louisa Laryea is a chartered accountant, banker, project management practitioner, industrial relations coach. Louisa, thank you so much for making time to be here with us tonight.
My pleasure, Animwaa.
Thank you so much to both of you. All right, so this is Strong and Sassy. Well, we're basically done, but what we're going to do is that we're going to continue the conversation next week, because there are many aspects of this that we did not tackle, and there are many questions that have come in, which we have not been able to answer. So next week we will continue this conversation. What I would really love for you to do is send us your story, send us your questions up front, so that we can apportion the time and plan and structure so that all of your questions can be answered. You can send a WhatsApp to our number 055-1111-997, 055-1111-997. Share with us your experiences. You know, if you've been in a toxic work environment, what it was like, what the challenges were. And also your questions. We'll be talking about, building an exit strategy when the workplace really is just toxic and there is no way out. And then we'll also be talking about coping mechanisms, the things that you can put in place so that you can continue to thrive regardless of the environment that you're in. There's a picture that I absolutely love. It's a picture of a sunflower growing on a cement pavement. And so sometimes environments are not the best, but we're still able to thrive if we have the right tools. That's it for us from Strong and Sassy. Thank you to the whole team, Mirabelle, Oliver. Thank you guys so much. And thank you to you. You could be anywhere, but you chose to be with us, and we truly appreciate it. My name is Animwaa Anim-Addo, and God willing, I'll be back again next week. Take care.